I pulled the phone off the nightstand before my eyes were even open. Force of habit after 31 years of early mornings. The screen showed 6:47 a.m. and one new text from my son. I figured it was about Thanksgiving. We'd been going back and forth about dates. I was wrong. Dad, Melissa and I have been talking. The Lakehouse needs to be in our names before the wedding. That's just how it has to be. If you can't do that, we think it's better you don't come. We don't want any awkwardness on the day. I read it 3 times. Then I set the phone face down on the mattress and stared at the ceiling for a long moment. The Lakehouse, the place my father built with his own hands in 1971. The place where I learned to fish, where I taught Daniel to ride a bike on the gravel path out front, where his mother and I scattered her own father's ashes off the dock the summer before she got sick. 53 years of that family's fingerprints on every wall, and my son had just texted me to tell me I could hand it over or stay home. I didn't respond. I got up, made coffee, and sat on the back porch watching the birds at the feeder. Here's what I want you to understand, friends, before I go any further. Daniel is 34 years old. He is my only child. And up until about 2 years ago, up until Melissa, I would have told anyone who asked that we had a good relationship. Not perfect, what father and son relationship is, but solid, honest, built on something real. His mother, Carol, passed 8 years ago. Pancreatic cancer, 14 months from diagnosis to the end. Daniel was 26, old enough to understand what we were losing, young enough that I still worried about him afterward. I checked in constantly those first 2 years. I flew out to Denver twice to make sure he was okay. I did what fathers do. When he met Melissa at a work conference 3 years ago, I was genuinely happy for him. She was sharp, well-dressed, spoke with a confidence that I respected at first. They moved fast, moved in together within 6 months, engaged within a year. I told myself that was fine. Carol and I had moved fast too. But there were moments, small ones, easy to dismiss. The first Christmas after they got together, I drove 4 hours to Denver and took them both to dinner. When the check came, Melissa looked at her nails. Daniel looked at me. I paid. No one said thank you. I told myself they were young. The following spring, Daniel called asking if I could help with a down payment on a condo. I sent $40,000. He paid me back 12 of it, then stopped mentioning the rest. I told myself it was a loan and let it go. Last year, Melissa wanted a destination engagement party in Sedona. She mentioned to Daniel, who mentioned to me that they were short on funds and it would mean so much if I could help cover the venue. I sent $8,000. I was not invited to the planning. I received a photo of the party from Daniel 3 days after the fact. I need you to understand that I am telling you this, not to paint myself as a victim. I'm telling you because, looking back now, the text I received that Tuesday morning was not a beginning. It was just the moment I finally stopped pretending I didn't see what was in front of me. The Lakehouse sits on 40 feet of waterfront in northern Wisconsin. I had it appraised 18 months ago for insurance purposes. It came in at just under $1.2 million. It had been in my family since before I was born. My father left it to me outright. My name is the only name on the deed. I knew, the moment I read Daniel's text, that this had Melissa's fingerprints all over it. Not because Daniel isn't capable of greed, every person is, but because of the phrasing, Melissa and I have been talking. That's how it started. Not I've been thinking, not Dad, I want to ask you something. They had talked. They had a strategy. And the strategy was to use the wedding, the one thing they assumed I would never risk missing, as the lever. What they didn't know is that I had a brother-in-law who was a real estate attorney. He passed 4 years ago. But I had watched him work for 20 years, and I had absorbed more than they gave me credit for. I finished my coffee. I went inside. I called my attorney, a woman named Ruth, who had handled Carol's estate, and who I trusted completely. I need to talk to you about putting the Lakehouse into a trust, I said. When do you want to come in? She asked. Today, if possible, I said. 2 o'clock, she said. I showered, got dressed, and only then picked up my phone to respond to Daniel's text. I hear you. Let's talk soon. That was all I said. 4 words. I wanted them to think I was considering it. Ruth's office was on the 4th floor of a building downtown that smelled like carpet cleaner and old paper. I had known her for 11 years. She did not waste time with small talk when I sat down and slid my phone across the desk with Daniel's text on the screen. She read it once, She pushed the phone back. Do you want to protect the property from a potential future claim? She said. I want to make sure that no one can ever pressure me into signing that property over, I said. And I want to make sure that if I did, for any reason, want to leave it to Daniel someday, that decision is entirely and only mine to make on my own timeline. She nodded slowly. Irrevocable trust, she said. You transfer the property into the trust. The trust owns it. You can name yourself as the trustee and retain use of the property for your lifetime. Daniel or anyone else you designate can be named as the beneficiary, but the asset cannot be transferred, sold, or leveraged without your explicit instruction as trustee. The moment someone demands you sign it over, there is nothing to sign. It already belongs to the trust. I looked at her for a moment. How long does this take? If you want to move quickly, she said, I can have the documents drafted within 48 hours. We file, we record the deed transfer with the county, and it's done. The property is beyond reach. Let's move quickly, I said. I want to pause here, friends, and say something directly. I know some of you are thinking, shouldn't a father try to talk to his son first? Shouldn't I have called Daniel, sat him down, given him a chance to explain himself? I had that instinct. Believe me, I had it. But I thought about what Ruth said. There is nothing to sign. I thought about the $40,000 in the 12 that came back. I thought about the Sedona party I wasn't invited to. I thought about the way Melissa had looked at her nails when the check came. And I thought about the fact that my son had not called me. He had not asked. He had not said, Dad, can we sit down and talk about the future of the property? He had sent a text that contained a condition. A deadline disguised as a conversation. People who love you don't text you ultimatums at 6:47 in the morning. I authorized Ruth to proceed. I drove home, made dinner for one, and watched the news. 3 days later, she called. The trust was formed, the deed had been transferred, and the recording with the county was being processed. The Lakehouse, for all legal and practical purposes, now belonged to the Gerald H. Morrow Family Trust. I was the trustee. I was the named occupant for life. I alone could direct what happened to it. That same afternoon, Daniel called. Not texted. Called. I answered on the second ring and kept my voice completely even. Hey, bud, I said. Dad. He sounded like he was choosing his words carefully. Did you get my message? I did, I said. We were hoping to hear back sooner. Melissa's pretty stressed about the wedding timeline, and there are some financial pieces that... I understand, I said. I've been thinking it over. Why don't you two come up for the weekend? We can have dinner, talk through everything in person. I'll make the fish chowder your mother used to like. A pause. I could hear Melissa's voice in the background, low and quick, and then Daniel said, Yeah, okay, that could work. This Saturday? Saturday's perfect, I said. I spent the rest of that week getting the house ready the way I always did when Daniel visited. I stocked the kitchen. I fixed the loose board on the dock that had been bothering me since spring. I put fresh linens on the guest bed. I also printed out a single page from Ruth's office, a summary document confirming the trust formation, the transfer of the deed, and the date it was recorded. I folded it once and put it in the kitchen drawer under the phone chargers, just in case. Saturday arrived cold and clear, the kind of October morning that makes the lake look like hammered pewter. Daniel's car came up the gravel drive just after noon. He looked tired. Melissa looked like she was arriving for a business meeting perfectly put together, already scanning the property with the kind of eyes that are doing math. I hugged my son. I shook Melissa's hand. I brought them inside, put coffee on, and let them settle. For the first 2 hours, it felt almost normal. We talked about the wedding venue, the guest list, a trip they were planning to Portugal for the honeymoon. I asked questions. I laughed when something was funny. I watched. Then, over dinner, Melissa set down her fork and folded her hands. Gerald. She said she never called me Dad, always Gerald. We really appreciate you having us up, and we want to be upfront with you. Daniel and I feel like the Lakehouse is the logical next step for this family. It should be in both our names before we start our life together. It just makes sense. I looked at my son. He was staring at his bowl. It would also, she continued, and this is the part I will never forget, give us the ability to use the property as collateral if we need to. We're looking at a business opportunity that requires some capital, and the Lakehouse is really the only significant asset available. There it was. Not the wedding, not the family, collateral, a business opportunity. They wanted to borrow against a property that had been in my family for over 50 years to fund something I hadn't even been told about. And the wedding invitation was the price of admission to the conversation. I took a sip of coffee. I set the mug down. I appreciate you being direct, Melissa, I said. So let me be direct back. I looked into the Lakehouse situation this week. I wanted to make sure I understood all the options. Daniel looked up. I actually took action on it already, I said. On Tuesday, actually. Same day I got Daniel's message. I got up, walked to the kitchen, opened the drawer, and came back with the folded paper. I placed it on the table between the bread basket and the butter dish. The Lakehouse was transferred into an irrevocable family trust on Tuesday afternoon, I said. The deed was recorded with the county on Thursday. I am the trustee for the duration of my life. The property cannot be sold, transferred, or used as collateral by anyone, including me, without my direction as trustee. There is nothing to sign over. There hasn't been since Tuesday. The silence at that table was the loudest thing I have ever heard. Melissa picked up the paper. She read it. She set it down and looked at Daniel with an expression I can only describe as the look of someone who has just realized the game was over before it started. Daniel said, "Dad, I'd like you to hear me out," I said. And my voice was still quiet, still even, because I had decided before they arrived that I was not going to raise it. Not once. I have loved you your whole life. I was there the morning you were born. I was there the night your mother died, and I held your hand in that hospital room, and I would do it again without a single hesitation. That is not in question. What is in question is whether you understand that love is not the same as surrender. I looked at Melissa. I don't know you well enough yet to love you, I said. I hope that changes, but I know that my son did not speak to me the way that text spoke to me before you were in the picture. And I know that $40,000 went somewhere it didn't come back from. And I know that a family property being described as collateral for a business deal I've never heard of is not a family conversation. It's a transaction. Melissa pushed her chair back. I don't think I need to sit here, and you're welcome to leave, I said. The door is where it was when you came in. She didn't leave. She sat back. And for the first time since I'd met her, she had nothing to say. Daniel looked at me for a long moment. His jaw was tight. I could see him cycling through anger, through embarrassment, through something that I hoped, somewhere underneath, was recognition. The wedding, he finally said. You are my son, I said. If you want me at your wedding, I will be there. That was never the variable. I was always going to be there if you wanted me. What I was not going to do is deed away a piece of your grandfather's life to prove it. He looked at the paper on the table. Is there any way to undo the trust? He asked, and I could tell it wasn't his question. It was something he'd been coached to ask. No, I said. That's what irrevocable means. Melissa stood up again. This time she picked up her coat from the back of the chair. Daniel, I'm going to take a walk. She went out the back door toward the dock. We watched her go. In the quiet that followed, my son and I sat across from each other at a table where he had eaten 1,000 meals growing up, where his mother had read the newspaper every Sunday morning, where his grandfather had taught us both to play poker on winter nights with pennies and too much laughter. She told me you'd just give it to me eventually anyway, Daniel said quietly. She said there was no reason to wait. She may be right, I said. That's not the point. Then what is the point, Dad? The point, I said, is that I am still your father, and you are still my son. And the way a person asks for something tells you everything about whether they've thought about what it costs the person they're asking. He was quiet for a long time. I didn't write that text, he said. I looked at him. I mean, I sent it, he said quickly. But she drafted it. I read it and I told myself it sounded fine. I know that's not an excuse. No, I said. It's not. We sat there a while longer. The lake was going dark outside the window, the last of the October light draining out of the sky. Eventually, Melissa came back in from the dock, and whatever she had decided on her walk, she had decided to be quieter about it. We cleaned up the dishes together in a silence that was uncomfortable, but not, I thought, entirely hopeless. They left before 8. Daniel hugged me at the door, a real hug, the kind he hadn't given me in probably 2 years. Melissa shook my hand again and said, Gerald, I hope you understand we meant no disrespect. I hope you understand the same, I said. I stood in the doorway and watched the headlights move down the gravel drive and disappear through the trees. I went inside. I washed the last of the dishes. I turned off the kitchen light and stood at the back window, looking out at the dock my father built. The dock I fixed the loose board on just 3 days ago. The dock where my son learned to cast a line when he was 7 years old and came home smelling like lake water and sunscreen and all the things that used to feel permanent. Not every ending comes wrapped up clean, friends. I want to be honest with you about that. Daniel called me 10 days later. He called me, not Melissa, not both of them together, him, alone, on a Sunday morning. He said he had been thinking. He said he was sorry. He said he didn't know how things had gotten to a point where he sent a text like that and told himself it was reasonable. We talked for almost 2 hours, the longest conversation we'd had in years. And somewhere in the middle of it, I heard my son again. The one who used to call me just to talk. The one who cried in that hospital hallway and let me hold him like he was small again. The wedding is in April. I have been asked, properly and warmly, to walk into that room as his father. The Lakehouse is still in the trust. It will remain there for as long as I am alive. And when the time comes when I decide, on my own terms, with no ultimatum attached, whatever I choose to do with it will be my choice. Made freely. Made with love. That is what my father gave me when he built that place. Not the property. The principle. Some things are not for sale. Some things are not for leverage. Some things you protect not because you're afraid of losing them, but because they mean something that money was never meant to measure. I still make the fish chowder on cold mornings. The recipe was Carol's. I make enough for 2, just in case. That's the kind of man I want to be, not the one who wins. The one who waits and watches and keeps the door open even when it costs him something to do it. Protecting what matters doesn't always mean holding on tightly. Sometimes it means being prepared quietly before anyone forces your hand. Gerald never raised his voice, never slammed a door, never made his son choose. He simply made sure that love couldn't be used as a weapon against him. When we protect ourselves with dignity instead of anger, we leave the door open for the people we love to walk back through it. A small note for you. This story was created and fictionalized by AI, crafted to bring you a moment of meaningful entertainment while sharing a positive lesson about love, boundaries, and the quiet strength it takes to keep a family together.